The rope binding Cordelia's wrist to the railroad tracks cut deep as she thrashed against the iron rails, her emerald dress torn and stained with tears. The distant whistle of the 347 freight train echoed through Millbrook Valley like a death knell, growing louder with each passing second. "Please!" She screamed into the autumn wind, her voice breaking. "Somebody help me!" From the shadows of the old grain mill, Jasper Whitmore emerged like a ghost from her past. His weathered hands still bore the calluses of honest labor, his dark eyes holding the same intensity that had captivated her 3 years ago, before she'd chosen wealth over love, before she'd agreed to marry the banker's son. "Sweet mercy," he breathed, recognizing the woman who'd shattered his heart. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the tracks, his boots pounding against the packed earth. "Jasper?" Cordelia's eyes widened in disbelief. "But how? Don't talk." "Darling, hold still." His knife worked frantically at the ropes while the train's whistle grew deafening. Steam billowed in the distance as the locomotive rounded Devil's Bend, its headlight cutting through the twilight like a sword. The first rope snapped, then the second. But the third, the one around her ankles, held fast, its knot swollen with moisture from the morning dew. "Go," she sobbed. "Leave me. It's too late." Instead, Jasper threw himself across her body, his strong arms encircling her waist. "If these rails take you, they take us both." The ground trembled beneath them. 30 yards, 20, the engineers. Frantic bell clanged in desperate warning, but physics and momentum cared nothing for human pleas. With a final, savage tug, the rope gave way. Jasper rolled them both off the tracks just as the freight train thundered past, its wind whipping Cordelia's auburn hair across her tear-streaked face. They lay gasping in the tall grass, hearts hammering against each other's chests. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply existed in the space between death and salvation. "You came back," she whispered against his shoulder. "Never left, really." His thumb traced the rope burns on her wrists. "Been working the mills down in Cedar Falls, but I heard about your arrangement with Montgomery Ashford." Cordelia closed her eyes, shame coloring her cheeks. "He did this. When I tried to call off the engagement, she shuddered. "He said if he couldn't have me, no one would." Jasper's jaw tightened. Montgomery Ashford, the golden boy of Millbrook Valley, heir to the largest bank between here and Chicago. A man who collected beautiful things and destroyed them when they ceased to amuse him. Where is he now? The question came out as a growl. At the autumn harvest dance, playing the grieving fiancé, I suppose, telling everyone I took ill and retired early. Cordelia struggled to sit up, her legs still weak from terror. "He probably thinks I'm dead by now." "Good, let him think it." Jasper helped her to her feet, his mind already racing. "We need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find you." But as they stumbled away from the tracks, neither noticed the figure watching from the mill's second-story window, or the glint of silver in his hand. The abandoned Holloway farmstead sat like a broken dream against the star-studded sky, its windows dark and empty as dead eyes. Jasper pushed open the creaking door, supporting Cordelia as she limped inside. "Used to play here as children," she murmured, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "Before the fever took the whole family." Jasper lit an oil lamp with trembling fingers, casting dancing shadows across the dust-covered furniture. In the golden light, Cordelia looked ethereal, a ghost of the girl he'd loved, marked now by suffering and betrayal. "Tell me everything," he said gently, settling beside her on the old wooden bench. She pulled her torn shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Montgomery's not what people think. Behind those charming smiles and generous donations to the church." She shivered. "He has a collection, pictures, trophies from women who've caught his fancy." Jasper's hands clenched into fists. "Did he?" "No, but he made it clear that resistance would only make things worse." He wanted a perfect wife, he said, one who knew her place. Cordelia's laugh held no humor. When I found those horrible photographs in his study, when I saw what he'd done to other girls who tried to leave ... you ran. I tried to. But Montgomery has eyes everywhere in this town. Sheriff Caldwell, Mayor Harrison, they're all in his pocket. She looked up at Jasper with desperate eyes. There's something else, something worse. Before she could continue, the sound of hoofbeats thundered across the valley. Through the grimy window, they saw a torchlight flickering between the trees. A search party moving with predatory precision. He knows, Cordelia breathed. Somehow, he knows I'm alive. Jasper blew out the lamp, plunging them into darkness. Back door, now. They crept through the kitchen, but the floorboards groaned beneath, their feet like dying things. Outside, Montgomery's voice cut through the night air like a blade. I know you're in there, my dear. This little game of hide-and-seek has gone on long enough. Cordelia's hand found Jasper's in the darkness. I won't let him take me back, she whispered. I'd rather die first. Nobody's dying tonight except maybe Montgomery Ashford, Jasper replied grimly. He pulled her toward the cellar door. There's a tunnel down here. Runs all the way to the creek. As they descended into the musty darkness, they heard boots on the front porch, the scrape of the door being forced open. Montgomery's cultured voice drifted down like poisoned smoke. Really, darling, did you think that little theatrical performance would fool me? Poor Sheriff Caldwell was quite distraught when he found your torn dress by the tracks. I've been telling everyone how grief-stricken I am over your tragic accident. The cellar was black as pitch, filled with the scent of old earth and forgotten. Pings. Cordelia stumbled, her hand brushing against something that crackled papers hidden in a wooden crate by the light of Jasper's match. They saw dozens of photographs, letters, newspaper clippings, all depicting beautiful young women who'd vanished from towns across 3 counties. Some were branded with Montgomery's initials. Sweet Jesus, Jasper breathed. Above them, footsteps creaked across the floorboards. Montgomery's voice grew closer, more menacing. I have such plans for you, Cordelia. Such wonderful educational plans. You'll learn to appreciate my particular interests. Cordelia grabbed as many papers as she could carry. Evidence. Proof of Montgomery's crimes that went far beyond attempted murder. They found the tunnel, a narrow passage carved into the hillside, probably used by bootleggers during Prohibition. As they crawled through the suffocating darkness, Cordelia felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Behind them, Montgomery's roar of rage echoed through the farmhouse as he discovered the empty cellar, the missing evidence. The hunt was far from over. The old Presbyterian church sat like a fortress of faith against the pre-dawn darkness, its bell tower piercing the sky like a prayer made stone. Reverend Matthias Crowley was already awake when Jasper and Cordelia stumbled through his kitchen door, their clothes muddy and torn from their underground flight. Merciful heavens, the elderly minister gasped, setting down his coffee cup. Child, we thought you were dead. That was the intention, Cordelia said grimly, collapsing into a wooden chair. She spread the damning photographs across the scrubbed pine table. Reverend, you need to see this. As Crowley's weathered hands shuffled through the evidence, his face grew pale as morning mist. These poor souls. I remember some of them, missing persons from neighboring towns. His eyes hardened with righteous fury. That devil's spawn has been hunting women like game. He owns half this town, Jasper said, pacing like a caged wolf. Sheriff, mayor, probably half the county judges. How do we fight that? With truth, Crowley replied firmly. And faith, and perhaps? He walked to his desk and withdrew a leather-bound ledger. With this, the book contained records going back 20 years, donations, land purchases, business. Deals, all connected to Montgomery Ashford, all revealing a web of corruption that stretched across 3 counties. I've been documenting his activities for years, Crowley explained, waiting for the right moment, the right evidence to bring him down. He looked at Cordelia with paternal kindness. You, my dear, have given us that moment. A commotion outside interrupted their planning. Through the stained glass windows, they saw torches moving through the streets of Millbrook Valley. Montgomery's search had expanded, become a full-scale manhunt. He's telling people you've gone mad with grief, Crowley said sadly. That Jasper here kidnapped you, filled your head with delusions. Some folks are starting to believe it. Cordelia's heart sank. Even in escape, Montgomery's web of lies continued to trap her. There's one person who might listen, Jasper said suddenly. Lucinda Fairfax. Crowley nodded slowly. Lucinda owned the largest newspaper between here and the state capital. More importantly, she'd been Montgomery's victim once before she'd found the strength and resources to escape his clutches. She's in town for the Harvest Festival, Cordelia realized. Staying at the Grand Hotel. Heavily guarded by Montgomery's people, Jasper pointed out grimly. Then we go to her. Cordelia stood, her green eyes blazing with newfound determination. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If we're going to do this, we do it right. Crowley smiled, recognizing the steel beneath her gentle exterior. There's a service tunnel that runs from the church to the hotel's basement, built during the Underground Railroad days. As they prepared to leave, Cordelia turned to Jasper. The man who'd saved her life, who'd never stopped believing in her even when she'd stopped believing in herself. When this is over, she said softly, when Montgomery's behind bars and the truth comes out, will you still want me? Even knowing what I was willing to do for money and status? Jasper cupped her face in his calloused hands. Darlin', I've wanted you since we were 15 years old, and you tried to teach me to waltz behind your daddy's barn. Money, status, scandal, none of that matters. What matters is the woman standing here right now, brave enough to fight a monster. Their kiss was interrupted by the church bell beginning to toll not the regular call to worship, but the irregular, frantic pattern that meant danger. Fire. Emergency dot through the windows. They saw smoke rising from the direction of the Grand Hotel. Montgomery wasn't just hunting them anymore. He was destroying any possibility of the truth coming to light. Move, Jasper commanded. Now. As they descended into the tunnel that would either lead them to salvation or to their deaths, none of them noticed the figure watching from the church's bell tower, or the rifle in his steady hands. The Grand Hotel's basement reeked of smoke and fear as Jasper kicked open the tunnel's hidden door. Above them, the elegant lobby was chaos, guests fleeing in nightgowns and evening clothes, while Montgomery's men searched every room with methodical brutality. The fire's just a distraction, Cordelia whispered, coughing as smoke drifted down the stairs. He's using it to flush out anyone who might help us. Through the basement's grimy windows, they could see Lucinda Fairfax being escorted from the hotel by 2 of Montgomery's hired men, her hands bound, her usually immaculate silver hair disheveled. They're taking her to the mill, Jasper observed, his jaw tight with anger. Same place he probably planned to finish you. Reverend Crowley clutched his ledger like a shield. We need to get these records to someone with authority, someone Montgomery doesn't own. Who? Cordelia asked desperately. The county sheriff? The federal marshals? They're all either corrupt or too far away to matter. A new voice cut through their debate. Perhaps I can help with that. They spun to find a tall woman with steel-gray eyes and a badge pinned to her dark coat. Deputy U.S. Marshal Victoria Sterling had arrived in Millbrook Valley that morning to investigate reports of missing persons, reports that had been mysteriously delayed and misdirected for months. I've been tracking Montgomery Ashford's activities across 4 states, Sterling said grimly, holstering her weapon. The man's built himself a little kingdom of corruption, but kingdoms fall when you remove the right stones. She examined Crowley's ledger and Cordelia's photographs with professional efficiency. This is good. More than good. It's enough to bring down his entire operation. But first, we need to save Mrs. Fairfax. It's a trap, Jasper warned. He knows we'll come for her. Of course it is. Sterling smiled coldly. But Montgomery Ashford has never faced a federal marshal before. His bought and paid for local law enforcement won't help him against federal charges. They move through Millbrook Valley like ghosts, using back alleys and forgotten paths. The town was in chaos, fires burning in 3 locations, Montgomery's men everywhere, honest citizens cowering in their homes. At the old grain mill, they could see Lucinda tied to a chair in the upper window, Montgomery pacing around her like a predator. His voice carried on the night wind, cultured and calm despite the madness of the situation. She'll break eventually, he was saying. They always do. Fear is so much more reliable than affection, don't you think? Sterling positioned herself at the mill's main entrance, while Jasper and Cordelia crept toward the back stairs. Crowley, despite their protests, insisted on accompanying them. That man has terrorized my flock for too long, the old minister said firmly. It ends tonight. As they climbed the creaking stairs, they heard Lucinda's voice, weak but defiant. You can burn down half the county, Montgomery, but the truth has a way of surviving. People remember. People talk. Not if there's no one left to talk to, Montgomery replied pleasantly. Millbrook Valley is about to suffer a terrible tragedy. A gas explosion, perhaps. So sad when an entire town is wiped out in one night. Cordelia's blood turned to ice. He wasn't just planning to kill them, he was planning to destroy everyone who might have witnessed his crimes. At the top of the stairs, Jasper kicked in the door. Montgomery spun around, his handsome face twisted with rage and madness. Ah, the happy couple, he sneered, drawing a silver-plated revolver. How poetic. You'll die together after all. But Montgomery had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the woman he'd spent months terrorizing. Cordelia stepped forward, her green eyes blazing with fury. I'm not your victim anymore, Montgomery. I'm your judge. In her hand was Jasper's hunting knife, and for the first time in months, Montgomery Ashford looked afraid. The sound of Marshall Sterling's boots on the stairs grew closer as the confrontation reached its deadly climax. Put the knife down, Cordelia, Montgomery commanded, but his voice cracked like thin ice over deep water. The silver revolver trembled in his manicured hands that had never known honest work or real struggle. The way you put down your rope at the railroad tracks, she replied, advancing slowly. Behind her, Jasper tensed, ready to spring. The way you put down your camera when you were documenting your other conquests. Montgomery's eyes darted toward the window, calculating escape routes. You don't understand the pressures I face. The expectations. Sometimes a man needs ... outlets. Outlets? Cordelia's voice rose to a breaking point. Those were human beings. Daughters, sisters, women with hopes and dreams and families who loved them. Marshal Sterling's footsteps thundered up the stairs, but Montgomery was beyond caring about federal authority now. His carefully constructed world was crumbling, and in his desperation, he was revealing the monster he'd always been. They loved the attention at first, he snarled. Every single one of them. The gifts, the promises, the status that came with being chosen by Montgomery Ashford. It's only when they got ungrateful that discipline became necessary. Lucinda Fairfax, still bound to her chair, spoke with quiet dignity. I remember your discipline, Montgomery, the bruises, the threats. The night I had to jump from your second-story window to escape your particular form of love. And yet you kept quiet for years, Montgomery sneered. Just like all the others. Because deep down, you knew you were nothing without my attention. The words hung in the air like poison, and for a moment, even Jasper wondered if they might contain some twisted grain of truth. Had all these women been complicit in their own victimization? Then Cordelia spoke, and her words cut through Montgomery's manipulation like sunlight through fog. I kept quiet because I was terrified, she said simply. Because you convinced me. I was powerless. Because you made me believe that your version of love was the only kind I deserved. She took another step forward. But terror isn't love, Montgomery. And power without consent isn't strength, it's cowardice. Marshal Sterling burst through the door, her service weapon drawn. Federal Marshal, drop your weapon. Montgomery spun toward her, his revolver swinging wild. In that instant of distraction, Jasper lunged forward, tackling him to the floor. The gun discharged into the ceiling, raining plaster down like snow. But Montgomery was stronger than his soft appearance suggested, fueled by desperation and rage. He threw Jasper aside and scrambled. Toward the window, toward the rope ladder he'd prepared for his own escape. This isn't over, he screamed, one leg already through the frame. I own this town. I own these people. You can't. Cordelia's knife caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Not a killing blow, but enough to send him tumbling backward. Into the room, blood staining his expensive white shirt. Now it's over, she said quietly. Marshal Sterling moved in with professional efficiency, snapping handcuffs around Montgomery's wrists while he writhed and cursed on the floor. Montgomery Ashford, you're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy across state lines. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you'll exercise it. As Sterling read the charges, Jasper freed Lucinda from her bonds. The older woman's hands shook as she rubbed circulation back into her wrists, but her eyes were bright with vindication. 20 years, she whispered. 20 years I've been waiting for this moment. Reverend Crowley appeared in the doorway, his ledger tucked safely under his arm. The fires are out, he reported. Sterling's deputies have arrested Sheriff Caldwell and Mayor Harrison. It seems they were quite willing to confess once they realized Montgomery couldn't protect them anymore. Through the mill's windows, they could see the sun beginning to rise over Millbrook Valley, painting the sky in shades of hope and redemption. The long nightmare was finally ending, but as Marshal Sterling dragged Montgomery toward the stairs, he turned back to Cordelia with eyes full of malevolent promise. You think this ends it? He hissed. You think you can just walk away and live happily ever after? I have friends in places you can't imagine. Money hidden where no lawman will ever find it. This is just the beginning. Cordelia met his gaze without flinching. Then I guess we'll be ready for whatever comes next. 6 months later, Cordelia stood in the kitchen of the small farmhouse Jasper had built with his own hands, kneading bread, while sunlight streamed through gingham curtains. The simple gold band on her finger caught the light, a wedding ring forged from honesty rather than obligation. Montgomery's trial starts next week, Jasper announced, setting down the newspaper. As he returned from town, Lucinda's testimony is expected to be the final nail in his coffin. Cordelia paused in her work, flour dusting her apron. The nightmares had faded, but she still felt a chill whenever Montgomery's name was mentioned. What about his friends? The ones he threatened us with? Mostly bluster, turns out. Jasper pulled her into his arms, his touch gentle but sure. Marshal Sterling's investigation uncovered his whole network. Seems prosperity built on fear and corruption doesn't have much staying power when the light of truth shines on it. Through their window, they could see Millbrook Valley rebuilding itself. New businesses were opening, run by honest folk rather than Montgomery's cronies. The Grand Hotel had been purchased by Lucinda Fairfax, who'd transformed it into a refuge for women escaping dangerous situations. "There's something else," Jasper said carefully. "Sterling wants to offer you a position, working with her to investigate similar cases in other towns." Cordelia considered this, her hands still moving through the familiar rhythm of kneading. "What did you tell her? That it's your choice to make? That I'll support whatever you decide." He kissed her temple. "But I also told her you've got good instincts for this kind of work, that you understand what these women go through in a way most lawmen never could." The idea was appealing. Instead of hiding from her past, she could use it to help others break free from their own prisons of fear and manipulation. "I'd have to travel," she said, "leave you alone for weeks at a time. Darlin', I waited 3 years thinking I'd lost you forever. A few weeks here and there seems like a fair trade for knowing you're out there saving lives." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Reverend Crowley stood on their porch, his face beaming with satisfaction. "Thought you'd want to." "No," he said without preamble. "The church committee voted unanimously to establish a fund for Montgomery's victims. Full medical care, legal assistance, whatever they need to rebuild their lives." Cordelia felt tears prick her eyes. "That's wonderful, Reverend. Lucinda's contributing the bulk of the money, but the whole town's chipping in. Seems like once people understood what was really happening, they couldn't do enough to make amends." Crowley's expression grew more serious. "There's going to be a memorial service next month for all the women who didn't make it out alive. Lucinda asked if you'd be willing to speak." The request hit Cordelia like a physical blow. To stand before the entire community, to put words to the horror that had nearly claimed her own life. "She'd do it," Jasper said quietly, sensing her hesitation. "We both will. It's time this town faced the whole truth." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Cordelia made her decision. "I want to take Sterling's offer," she said, "at least for a while. There are other Montgomery Ashfords out there, other women who think they have no choice but to endure." Jasper nodded, unsurprised. "When do you start?" "After the memorial service. After we've said goodbye to the women who deserved better." She leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Sterling says there's a case in Colorado, mining town where young women keep disappearing. Sounds familiar, too familiar." Cordelia gazed out at the valley where she'd nearly died, where she'd found the strength to fight back, where she'd discovered that love built on equality was infinitely stronger than power built on fear. "But this time, I'll know what to look for. And more importantly, I'll know that monsters like Montgomery can be defeated." As if summoned by their conversation, a telegram arrived the next morning. Marshal Sterling's words were brief but urgent. 3 more missing in Colorado Springs. Similar pattern. How soon can you travel? Cordelia smiled as she packed her traveling bag, including the small derringer Jasper had taught her to shoot. Montgomery Ashford was awaiting trial. His empire of corruption crumbled to dust, but his legacy of pain lived on in other places. Other predators. The work was just beginning. The Colorado mountain town of Silver Creek bore an unsettling resemblance to Millbrook Valley, the same false prosperity, the same undercurrent of fear masked by enforced smiles. Cordelia adjusted her traveling coat as she stepped off the train, Marshal Sterling beside her, both women surveying the crowd of supposedly welcoming faces. "Randolph Blackstone," Sterling murmured, nodding toward a portly man in expensive suit. "Owns the silver mine, the bank, and most of the businesses. 3 young women have vanished in the past 2 months. Cordelia recognized the type immediately. The same predatory confidence that Montgomery had worn like cologne, The same assumption that wealth and position placed him above consequence. And the local law? Probably in his pocket, like always. Sterling's smile was razor-sharp. But federal jurisdiction has a way of cutting through local politics. Their first stop was the miners' rest boarding house, where the most recent victim, a girl named Rose Pemberton, had been staying. The proprietress, Mrs. Gwendolyn Hutchins, was a stout woman with worried eyes and work-worn hands. Rose was such a sweet thing, she said, leading them to the small room that still held traces of its former occupant. Come here from back east. To teach at the school, Mr. Blackstone took a particular interest in her education, if you catch my meaning. Cordelia examined Rose's belongings with professional efficiency, noting the expensive gifts mixed among modest possessions, jewelry, silk scarves, a gold locket that no schoolteacher's salary could afford. He courted her, Sterling asked. Courted. A nice word for it. Mrs. Hutchins' mouth tightened. More like hunted. Flowers every day, invitations to fancy dinners, promises about what he could do for a clever girl who knew how to appreciate generosity. The familiar pattern made Cordelia's stomach turn. When did she disappear? Night, she tried to return all his gifts. Said she was accepting a position in Denver, wanted to leave town immediately. Mrs. Hutchins wrung her hands. Found her room empty the next morning, but her train ticket was still on the dresser. In Rose's small writing desk, Cordelia discovered something that made her pulse quicken, a half-finished letter that would never be sent. Dear sister, I fear I have made a terrible mistake. Mr. Blackstone is not the gentleman he pretends to be. The things he says, the way he looks at me, ... I've heard whispers about other girls who came to Silver Creek and simply vanished. If something happens to me ... The letter ended there, ink smeared as if interrupted by sudden violence. Mrs. Hutchins, Sterling said carefully. What happened to the other girls? The ones who disappeared before Rose? Well, there was Jenny Morrison came here to work at the hotel. And before her, Susanna Clark, who was helping Doc Whitley with his practice. The older woman's voice dropped to a whisper. All pretty girls. All young and alone in the world. All took up with Mr. Blackstone before they ... left. But Cordelia was studying a photograph on Rose's dresser, a group picture from a church social. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, stood a figure she recognized. Sterling, she said urgently, look at this. The marshal examined the photograph, her face growing pale. Son of a bitch, that's not possible. In the picture, standing beside Randolph Blackstone like a trusted advisor, was Montgomery Ashford. The photograph was dated just 3 weeks ago, long after Montgomery's arrest and imprisonment. Either this is an old picture with a wrong date, Sterling said grimly, or Montgomery Ashford has been running his operation from prison. They rushed to the telegraph office, Sterling's message flying across the wires to her superiors. The reply came back within an hour, and its contents made both women's blood run cold. Ashford escaped federal custody 2 weeks ago, presumed armed and extremely dangerous. Exercise all caution. As the implications sank in, Cordelia felt the familiar chill of being hunted. Montgomery hadn't just escaped, he'd come looking for her, using Silver Creek as bait to draw her into his web of revenge. We need to leave, Sterling said. Now? This whole thing is a trap. But even as they hurried toward the train station, Cordelia's conscience wouldn't let her abandon Rose Pemberton and the other missing women to Montgomery's twisted games. No, she said, stopping in the middle of Silver Creek's main street. This ends here, tonight. Through the window of Blackstone's mining office, they could see 2 figures in heated discussion. One was the portly mine owner. The other was Montgomery Ashford, very much alive and apparently very much in control. As if sensing their observation, Montgomery turned toward the window and smiled, the same charming predatory smile that had once convinced Cordelia she was the luckiest woman in the world. He raised his hand in a mocking salute, then pointed toward the abandoned mine shaft at the edge of town. The message was clear: come alone, or the missing women die. Cordelia checked her derringer, her jaw set with grim determination. Get back up, Sterling. Telegraph for every federal marshal in Colorado. I'm not leaving you to face him alone. You have to. If something goes wrong, if he kills me too, someone needs to be alive to tell the world what Montgomery Ashford really is. Cordelia squeezed her friend's hand. Besides, I'm not the same terrified woman he trapped on those railroad tracks. I know his tricks now. As the sun set behind the Colorado peaks, Cordelia walked toward the abandoned mine, knowing that one way or another, her battle with Montgomery Ashford would end tonight. In the distance, she could hear the whistle of an approaching train reinforcements, or perhaps just another load of unsuspecting victims for Montgomery's collection. The final confrontation was about to begin. Epilogue 5 years later, Cordelia Whitmore stood at the podium of the National Conference on Women's Safety, her marshal's badge gleaming in the gaslight. Before her sat an audience of lawmakers, law enforcement officials, and journalists, all gathered to hear about the revolutionary new techniques for investigating crimes against women. The Ashford method, as it had come to be known, was named after the monster who had inadvertently taught law enforcement how predators operated across state lines. Montgomery's network had been vast, his methods sophisticated, but his weaknesses had proven fatal. In the end, it hadn't been bullets or badges that brought him down in that Colorado mine shaft. It had been his own arrogance, his absolute certainty that he understood women better than they understood themselves. When he tried to recreate the terror of their first encounter, he'd forgotten that Cordelia was no longer the frightened girl who'd nearly died on those railroad tracks. She'd walked into that mine knowing exactly what she'd find: Rose Pemberton. And the other missing women, alive but traumatized, held as bait for Montgomery's final game. She'd also known that Montgomery would try to recreate their original confrontation, would need to prove his dominance one last time. What he hadn't expected was Marshal Sterling's backup plan. A team of federal agents positioned at every exit, ready to move the moment Cordelia signaled. Or the fact that Randolph Blackstone, faced with federal conspiracy charges, had been more than willing to testify against his supposed partner. Montgomery Ashford died as he had lived, believing himself superior to everyone around him, right up until the moment Sterling's rifle bullet found its mark. The key to understanding predators like Montgomery Ashford, Cordelia told her audience, is recognizing that their power comes from isolation. They separate their victims from support networks, from truth, from the belief that escape is possible. But when women work together, when we share our stories and support each other's courage. She paused, thinking of Lucinda Fairfax's newspaper empire, now devoted to exposing corruption across the American West, of Mrs. Hutchins, who'd transformed her boarding house into a way station for women fleeing dangerous situations, of Rose Pemberton, who'd become a teacher in Denver and helped establish the first women's legal aid society in Colorado. When we work together, Cordelia continued, we become unstoppable. In the audience, Jasper watched his wife with quiet pride. Their marriage had weathered 5 years of dangerous work, long separations, and the constant shadow of violence that followed her profession. But it had also been strengthened by mutual respect, shared purpose, and the knowledge that their love had been forged in the fires of genuine crisis. After the conference, they would return to their farm in Millbrook Valley, where Jasper was raising horses and Cordelia was writing a book about her experiences. It was a life built on choice rather than circumstance, on partnership rather than possession. As the applause died down and the audience began to file out, A young woman approached the podium. She was pale and thin, her expensive dress unable to disguise the fear in her dark eyes. "Marshall Whitmore?" she said hesitantly. "My name is Catherine Sinclair. I'm from a town in Texas called Redemption Falls, and I think there's another Montgomery Ashford there." "Cordelia,"